Okay, so again, welcome to Lehigh University's FLEX MBA current student panel tonight. We have a number of questions that we want to get to, and for those that are here live tonight, feel free to, at any time, put a note into the chat box here, and we'll be happy to answer that and ask the committee. But I'm going to start the first question, and many of you, as you were probably researching MBA programs, probably had a short list of programs that made the most sense for you. Could you talk to us a little bit about like why Lehigh? What stood out to you as far as why the program made the most sense for you? And feel free, whoever wants to unmute first.
Yeah, I'm happy to
I
go.
guess I'll jump in first. So as I said, I did my undergrad at Lehigh, so to me it was a perfect fit to come back. I was looking for something that I could do, have the flex to do remotely, because throughout my career I've always wanted to go back, but I've always every 3 to 5 years was moving around for my career. And actually, COVID kind of finally helped that to where everything kind of got forced online. So that was good for me. And I wanted a mix of programs that had that flexibility, but also had the prestige and the return on investment. And I was looking at some of the other programs. Like I was looking at UNC, Indiana, but some of those programs were just way more expensive than what I was really looking for. And when I looked at the cost of per credit, Lehigh was very competitive from that perspective as well. And since I was going to need financial assistance from my company, that was one of the other perks I had, the tuition reimbursement. So that definitely helped. And all around, it just made perfect sense from a financial, ranking perspective. Everything I was looking for. And I agree.
Great. Dennis, go ahead. You were going to chime in.
Yeah, I think for me, Lehigh stood out as a really attractive option for three reasons. I think value, as Mike mentioned, I think you can't beat the cost. I'm not really receiving any support from my company, so tuition is obviously important, knowing what that number is. Secondly, I think the hybrid format is fantastic. I've taken electives on campus. I've chosen to take most of my core courses here through Zoom, but as importantly, the courses are, other programs sometimes, give you a modularized on-demand version, and then ones that maybe have the Zooms available may not have that in-person option. So I thought Lehigh represented the best mix of kind of physical in-person, the ability to do Zoom, like we're doing tonight, and then also go back and check the recordings if work travel comes up or something of that nature. And then lastly, I'd say, as importantly, the mix of students. So being in the pharmaceutical industry myself, I think most people kind of skew to go more towards like a St. Joseph's or a Villanova, where you see more of the life sciences, I'd say, cohort. But for me, I was really intrigued by meeting people with different backgrounds, more that engineering background. And I think the mix of students is absolutely impeccable.
Great. Thank you. Alexis?
Yeah, just maybe to add one thing, and I think Dennis hit the nail on the head. I would just add that when I was thinking about the global, or I'm sorry, the different class formats, I'm not sure if we'll get into this a little bit later, Kevin, so don't want to steal your thunder,
No,
but
you're good.
I was able to be a part of the global immersion program, and that was something that stood out to me at Lehigh compared to other universities. So I was able to receive credits to go study in Dubai and hoping to do the same again this upcoming spring in a different country, um, which was sort of unmatched in other programs that I saw. And for someone that was not able to study abroad during undergrad because of COVID, and then I was also a part of the track team at Lehigh. It just felt like an opportunity that I didn't want to pass up, and just learn about not only the culture, but you also get to learn the business side of what is going on in those other countries. So happy to get into that a bit more, but that definitely stood out.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. So maybe people may not be familiar with kind of our optional elective excursion. Can you tell them a little bit about the experience and kind of what that looked like?
Yeah, happy to. So there is a 3 credit elective it's a class, and it's called the Global Immersion Experience. One faculty member and one professor join you as a part of the program. You go in the spring semester, and it's typically or it is hosted during spring break. So I was there for 9 days. I went a little early and then left the Saturday that spring break ended. When you're there, you get to experience the culture. So there are kind of culture experiences. I got to go on a safari with our entire cohort that went. So there was about 15 of us. So not only were you able to meet people and your classmates, which I thought was so awesome. I got to kind of know them certainly more on a personal level than I would just even in a normal in-person class. But then I also got to learn so much about the culture. In addition to those kind of culture experiences, you go to businesses. So each day you'll either go to one or two businesses. You can maybe even go to three. The entire cohort goes. I will use maybe I won't use a specific company as an example, but you go to the company, they have real people that are working there, sit down with you. They either give you a tour of the facility, or they kind of give you an overview. I really liked my experience. We went to PwC there. There I am saying it. And we got to learn about just kind of the strategy that's happening in Dubai and how they're thinking about it, which was so interesting, much different than here in the States. So I loved that experience. And then I really just thought it was a great opportunity to kind of meet your classmates. At the end of that sort of week and 2 days experience, you go back home, of course, and you just really write a reflection on your time there. You have a few extra meetings with your cohort to kind of talk about the experience, what could have been better, or maybe just done differently to enhance the experience for next year. I believe that the idea is to sort of always switch locations. So it's not always going to be Dubai, but we always look for places that one, the students would be engaged with. And then of course, there's also an educational factor. Like we're not just going to go to a country that sounds appealing, but maybe we don't have ties to, maybe the business isn't booming there, or not even booming, but kind of up and coming. There needs to be a sort of a lesson learned there. So I thought it was an amazing experience. I recommend it to every single person I get to talk to that's in the FLEX program, because I didn't really know what to expect, and it beyond exceeded my expectations.
Nice, thank you. Veronica, how about you regarding kind of why, when you were looking at programs, kind of why Lehigh was on your short list?
Yeah, so Lehigh was on my short list for a couple reasons. So I was at that point in my career where I was transitioning from an individual contributor to a people manager. And it was kind of what comes next. Like, I'm an engineer by background, and I've always been a little bit more technically curious. But the higher up in your career you get, you almost get a level removed from the technical aspect. And a part of me wasn't really willing to accept that yet at the time that I was looking at programs. So I was applying to a mix of Masters of Engineering and MBA programs. And as I've kind of went through my short list, I lived in the Philadelphia area. The flexibility that Lehigh offered between in-person and Zoom classes, even if you're in the distance learning, you can go for certain classes in person, which I've taken advantage of. But then also I was able to get a concentration in so I'm in the FLEX MBA and engineering program. So my curriculum is a mix between business and engineering. So I thought it gave me the best of both worlds when I wasn't sure where I saw myself. But as I've kind of proceeded through this program, I feel like what I've learned in the MBA is a lot more applicable to what I do now and work. So I think it gave me that comfort level of what I knew versus trying something new.
Perfect, thank you. And we had a question come in regarding the international immersion. I'll be happy to answer it. So the question was about when we talked about it, is there a limit to how many times you can participate in the immersion? It's a great question. The answer is no, not really. We do have students that will go on multiple immersion trips. I would say the trick of it is there's a trade-off when you look at the program, if you want to do a concentration or not. Because if you end up doing a concentration, say you do finance as a concentration, currently the curriculum, it kind of limits you a little bit from exploring outside of finance. So it's always an elective class. So if we offer a course that has the week-long immersion in Dubai and it's supply chain management related, that course technically isn't going towards your degree. So a lot of our students do what's called the FLEX MBA general business or general concentration. I'd be curious for the people in the room here, other than Veronica, who's a little bit of a different situation. Dennis, Alexis, Mike, are you concentrating in something or are you doing kind of the general business track?
I'm on the general business track, ultimately decided to do that because I really only felt that the other option would be finance. And I felt like I got a lot of those classes and that knowledge kind of in my day to day. Ultimately, I think it kind of boils down to I don't want to necessarily pivot industries, which is why I felt like the general made sense for me.
How about others?
Same here. As I mentioned, my goal was to try and become more of a general manager within, my industry. So having understandings of different areas of the entire supply chain. So manufacturing, procurement, sales, marketing. So to me, it was just trying to get a good overall understanding of all the different aspects that occur within business and not necessarily focus on, something that was in my direct area of knowledge or expertise. So I just wanted that well-rounded
Yeah.
balance.
Dennis?
Yeah, and for me, I'm on track potentially to do a concentration in corporate entrepreneurship. So a little bit of a different vibe, but the electives for that particular concentration really were super interesting to me. It was related to everything from founding a company to going and getting venture capital. How do you protect the intellectual property associated with your organization, and then all the way through potentially taking a company public. So something that I thought was super interesting and really not electives you would see somewhere else. We've had some pretty amazing speakers come through here that I've been super impressed with. So I'm planning on maintaining that concentration there in corporate entrepreneurship.
Perfect. Yeah, so there's definitely, I would say, a little bit of a trade-off depending on what your goals are, but half of our students in general end up pursuing the general MBA for the two reasons that you heard here. Number one, it gives you a lot of opportunities to explore different areas. Also, from a flexibility standpoint, it gives you a lot more flexibility with your scheduling. And I'll come back, Dennis, because I do want to talk about corporate entrepreneurship a little bit. But I do want to ask a little bit about like what does your week look like as far as working full time, having other commitments, and then juggling the MBA program? I'd love to hear a little bit about like, how many courses you typically take a semester and like the workload that you see outside of a given class.
I can kick this one off. So I think my typical work week, so the classes are 6 to 9 p.m. every class I've taken in the program. It's usually one day a week. I usually take two classes a semester, so I'll have class 2 days a week. And then I try to balance it. There's some classes that are a little bit more quantitative, like accounting, etc. And there's some that are a little more quantitative. Might be mixing those up. But I think I usually, on average, outside of class, spend about 8 hours a week between readings and homework. So it's not anything different than what you do working full time. So I think that's something I really like about this program, that everyone has at least 2 years of work experience when they enroll in the program. So it's really just time management. Like after work, I'll do homework for maybe an hour or two, and I spend a little bit more on weekends. And then a lot of this program is about teamwork. So typically at least one day a week, I'll meet with my group for whatever course I'm in that semester, because there's typically a group project. So my week is usually I do homework, class 2 nights a week, homework 2 nights a week, and maybe a morning on a weekend.
About anybody else similar, different?
I'm also typically taking two classes a week. I've never tried three, but I think for me personally, that would be too much. So 2 days a week, and then I agree with Veronica. At least in my experience, have had meetings for a group presentation once a week. So I would say you're likely on Zoom in some fashion at least 3 days a week. Um, which I think can maybe seem daunting at first. I know it certainly seemed daunting for me, but you kind of just get in the groove of things and it's really not as bad as it sounds. And the meeting time is always out of class meeting with your group is always flexible. So I'll give an example. I'm currently in a group right now. I do not have any children, but two people in my group do have children. So they have asked, like, can we meet at 8:30 once I put the kids down? And everyone is super always accommodating. We're like, of course, whatever you need to do, that totally makes sense. Let's do that. So that's sort of how I would say the culture that I've experienced so far. And of course, if anything comes up, kind of your team always is there to support you and fill you in on anything you missed. School work, as far as homework is concerned, I agree with Veronica. Quantitative classes definitely take more, and you will see, especially in your first year, you typically are in more quantitative classes. Like I remember that first accounting class was probably a bit heavier on the workload, just because that's more like studying, kind of application based. Qualitative, I would say, is less. So think kind of the marketing classes, the management classes, not as much work there. But I would agree it's probably around 8 hours, depending on the semester. Some semesters will feel really light, and some semesters will feel a bit heavier. And I found the advisors always typically, they are very honest. They'll say, this one is a lot of out of class work, so I wouldn't pair this with another one. They tell you exactly kind of what to expect going in, and I really would trust their guidance if they say don't do these back to back. Or in the same semester. I never do. So I would trust their guidance and definitely rely heavily on them to better understand, what the semester will look like.
Yeah, 8 hours sounds like a lot, but it's actually the time goes really quickly. Like I genuinely enjoy the readings that the professors assign. They're very applicable to work. Like last week we had one about negotiation. So there are things that you just enjoy working on that's maybe more unique than what you would do in your day-to-day work. So the time goes quickly. It's definitely just getting into the rhythm.
We had a question come in about kind of the group work. So, generally, let's say you're just taking one class at a time as an example. How much group work do you typically see? And give me an example maybe of what that group work looks like. Like, is it a project? Is that the outcome of this? If somebody could just maybe give an example, that would be super helpful.
I think so a lot of the group works that I've been in, so typically there's different case studies that get assigned throughout the semester. So usually like 4 case studies, and you'll have 2 weeks or so to work on each one within your group, which the groups are usually 3 or 4 people in a group. So you spend a week kind of reading the case studies, signing out who's going to work on which part. And then you kind of, as you work on your own, you come back together and you review with everybody. Usually there's a report that has to go with it. Then usually for one of the cases, it kind of rotates between the groups within the class. You'll have to be like the lead group and present it. So you'll do like a PowerPoint presentation and facilitate the discussion within the groups. So most of them are, like I said, 4 case studies. Some of them they'll have like a final project that you also have to do, which just kind of culminates throughout the semester and all the different tools and things you've learned. You're supposed to kind of build that into it. So each class is a little bit different, but I'd say the majority of them are probably more on the case study side, at least for the kind of more quantitative classes, I believe.
I agree. I would add for the qualitative classes, and something that I've really enjoyed is you might be in a group with 4 people and the professor will say, one of you 4 pick your company and then apply all of these sort of course frameworks on. So it's a great opportunity to learn about other people's companies, and learn more about it in that way, which I've really enjoyed.
That actually leads me to another question. So could you each maybe give me an example of where you learned something and then you were able to apply it to your actual job? Because that's obviously the goal of an MBA program, is kind of this applicability that you can turn around and use it. Does anybody have any examples where something in the classroom happened that then they were able to use at their work?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. This one's maybe just a random example, but I think it gives you a little more ability to talk the language of your colleagues, right? So I'm on the commercial side of my team. So most of the people I work with are in business, but my educational background is more clinical in nature and scientific in nature. And learning about, the cost of capital, right? What is equity cost? What is debt cost? How does that affect a company's perspective on what a prospective hurdle rate might be for a given project or a given contract for which that company is about to enter into, has been super illuminating for me in terms of how to reverse engineer the outcome that my organization is looking for. So I'm just, a small example like that, but I think it definitely helps provide perspective and context that you otherwise wouldn't have.
Anybody else want to chime in on that?
I mean, I think for me, some of the accounting classes have been really helpful. Within my career and experience, I've been like a plant manager where I'm in charge of the P&L for our plant. So really understanding how different costs are allocated, how you accrue costs or defer costs, understanding the overhead and how that gets captured so that when you go to price out a product, how that is captured. So, the salespeople sell at a certain price, but understanding what costs go into that cost of goods sold and calculating the profitability. It's really understanding the kind of nuances of that so that you can maintain and stay on budget and make sure you're being profitable within your industry.
I can think of a more like qualitative example. It's an assignment I had in a previous semester, which I think you hear this question a lot, is where do you see yourself in 5 years? And kind of sometimes when you hear that question, it's a little bit like, I don't know. But I had an assignment in one of my classes where we really had to break down, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What are your long-term goals, and what are some intermediate steps you can map out along the way and milestones that can really help you achieve that goal? And so it was a very reflective assignment that you really broke down both professionally and personally what was important to you. And it actually, an assignment like that really helped me pivot to a new career that maybe I wasn't ready to take that step when I enrolled in this program 3 years ago, but since enrolling, I did.
I can also I'll provide two brief examples. I'm saying two because the first one is related to the global immersion program. So like I mentioned, I work in debt capital markets. And when we were in Dubai, we got to learn about Islamic financing through a specific company. So I got to go back to Prudential and compare and discuss the differences, which was really interesting. We actually had a 30-minute meeting, our entire team, to learn about it because it was just very different than what we were used to. And it was really great to understand and appreciate. And my other example is from one of those group projects that I was mentioning. We actually got to focus on Prudential, and there was another person in my group that also worked at Prudential. And the assignment was to focus on a specific product that you think needs improvement. So we really took a look at Prudential's, all of our products, which are really just services, financial services. And ultimately, me and another person on my cohort that works at Pru, we presented our final project to one of the heads of the businesses to kind of talk through some of our ideas that we had. And I thought it was just a really great example of real application. They didn't take our suggestions, but maybe that's to come.
Great. And I'm going to pivot a little bit.
One of the other
go ahead.
Honestly, one of the other cool things that I really liked, I took a class called negotiation, and really learning how to, just navigate through every different scenario. So that doesn't even have to be work related. Like you can learn how to negotiate, you know, your salary at work, or it could be, hey, here's how I get my kids to, do different activities at home. So it's kind of a good opportunity to do like different role plays and really put yourself out there in a, kind of a safe environment where, hey, you can try a different scenario or, take on different perspective than you would normally do, and then see how well that goes. And you can learn that aspect of it. So it's good for, buying a house, different negotiations within work. So, trying to convince people to take on your different project idea, or understand, what are some of the key values of things that you really want versus something else that, the other party that you're negotiating with wants. So I thought that was a really cool class that applies to both work and personal situations.
Yeah, it's that negotiation definitely is one of the more popular electives. And again, that I believe off the top of my head, that can either count if you're doing the general business degree, it can count as kind of elective credits. Also in the supply chain management concentration, I believe it meets one of those requirements as well. I do want to welcome Dan. Dan, are you able to just unmute yourself and maybe do a quick introduction? I know Dan actually had Flex MBA group work that he was doing tonight. So Dan, do you want to just say hi real quick to to everybody?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Hey, everyone. My name is Dan Sicular. I am, everyone, a Flex MBA student here. Finishing up my second year in the program. Feels like yesterday that I was a prospective student on this kind of call as well. I'm studying on the general track, but my undergrad was in statistics. I work in analytics. I'm based in North Jersey, work in New York. The thing that I love most about the program and, the fact and the reason why I'm doing the general track is because I really want to understand the bigger picture and how my, piece of the cog, my piece of the wheel kind of fits into everything else. Because analytics, we can be kind of siloed across the organization. So really want to understand overall how decisions are being made. And so far I really feel like that's been the case. So really happy with what I've been getting out of it so far.
Great. And thanks again for joining us here. I was going to ask real quick, come back to this. Dennis, you had talked a little bit about the corporate entrepreneurship concentration or corporate entrepreneurship courses. And what I'll tell people that aren't familiar is these courses, I would say, buck the trend a little bit of the evening, kind of one night a week, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. classes. Could you talk a little bit maybe about some of the corporate entrepreneurship classes and kind of how those one credit classes are structured? Because, other than negotiations, those are obviously really popular classes for MBA students.
Yeah, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about it, Kevin, because it's been my favorite part of the program by far. So as Kevin mentioned, right, these are one credit courses, but the way in which that credit is obtained is really through a 2-day, deep dive, experiential, all day class. So they begin on Friday. I'll typically take a PTO day. They go all day Saturday. And the beautiful thing about this specific program is, and depending upon the domain you're in, whether it's intellectual property, whether it's how to pivot a startup into a product people actually want, is the cases are generally modeled after real experiences. So the professor who leads it, Dale Falcinelli, kind of knows the outcome already, but there's no real right answer in terms of how to think about the business problem. Secondly, they bring in some world-class speakers and people to come in and impart their wisdom. For example, the first course of that particular program that I took, they had Scott Cooper, who was involved obviously with the VC firm Andreessen Horowitz, and more recently, I believe he was involved in Doge. So, I mean, really high-powered people and people that have been there, done that, seen pretty much everything. Super interesting course, and it's not something you see every day, right? Like there's only so many firms that are venture backed. Obviously, a very small proportion of them go public these days, and we dive into every element of that and how to get there.
And just a quick follow-up. So as a working professional, how did how do those courses feel? I guess obviously it's, taking the Friday off, doing the Saturday, pre-work, post-work, like how much of a lift was it compared to kind of taking a 3 credit class over a full semester?
Yeah, it's a good question. I prefer it over the full semester format. And I say that because it gives you a chance to unplug from your work responsibilities. In my case, I took PTO, so you're fully present for that full day versus, hey, I'm grabbing dinner, I'm hopping on a Zoom and I'm getting through this class with whatever responsibilities are going on at home, right? I think that's something that was attractive to me for that particular format. But also it tends to lend itself pretty nicely to having robust in-person discussions and debates. So yeah, I'm just a big fan of that format, big fan of that series and those courses.
Great. And Dan, I'll give you a chance to get caught up to speed here, and then I see we had another question come in. Dan, could you talk maybe your I think year two you said in the program. Any courses that have stood out to you so far?
I mean, this is going to sound silly, but I think, the financial accounting course actually stood out, especially, where the company I work for, kind of is in their life cycle. We are a smaller company, and there have been discussions around, acquisition, things like that. Um, so my mind is, curious about like, oh, how is our finance team kind of reporting on revenue and EBITDA and like those really relevant metrics when it comes to acquisition and just generally like reporting on your earnings, things like that, and like what are we potentially sharing with anyone who's interested externally, like what's not. And so those are kind of conversations. Well, I'm not part of those conversations, but those are like thought pieces that I just hadn't really thought of before. And so it's really kind of helped me think about how, this real world event or potential event, one, matters, and two, like what is actually relevant that goes into that real world event instead of thinking, okay, this will happen when it happens and we'll figure it out later. So, yeah, financial accounting is, to me, another fun, almost math-based class, but there's also a lot of conceptual topics that I take that I felt were really relevant.
Question for everybody, and we'll probably wrap it up in the next 5 to 10 minutes just to be transparent. For a lot of prospective students that might be here live tonight or might be watching this in the coming days, any advice that you would have on kind of getting prepared to have a little bit of a life change here and become a part-time student while you're working? I'm just curious, like when you guys look back on the experience, anything that you did from a time management standpoint, anything that would help them kind of make their lives easier as they start to embark on this.
I can start.
Sure.
I will admit, Kevin, I was very nervous for this shift. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have zero time to be with friends and family. And that's not necessarily the case. My advice is to be very transparent with your company up front. So I sort of set boundaries on the days that I have to be home. So I work in the office 3 days a week, but of course, those 3 days are typically the days that I have class. So at the start of every semester, I tell my manager what days of the week I have class. So in this instance, I have class on Wednesdays, Thursdays. So I tell her on Wednesdays when I'm in the office, I have to leave by 4:45, no later. I'm happy to sort of monitor my, Teams chat if things are urgent, but it's sort of a respect thing. And, she respects the fact that I'm in class, and I'm sure most companies are very supportive of you kind of going back to school. So I found that to be extremely effective, and kind of I don't need an hour and 15 minutes to get home and be ready for class, but you need the time to go home, unwind for maybe 10, 15 minutes, get your dinner, heat it up, and kind of, change into maybe more comfy clothes, and then get back online. So that was really important to me, and something that I didn't start doing until my second semester, but I found very, very helpful. And I do that now moving forward.
Anybody
Yeah, I'll
else?
second that. I mean, the transparency is key, both with your work, but then myself. I have a wife and 3 kids, so just understanding with my wife, hey, here's the schedule, and understanding what events our kids have coming up, so that I can then work with my group mates on the different cases, and we can try and coordinate our schedules. Um, so really, just taking that into account. And similarly, I was nervous. Like I said, I'd always wanted to come back from my MBA, but it took me 15, 16 years after I graduated, and trying to really get back in the saddle of, hey, can I do this? If I slipped in the last however many years, and really trying to come in with some of the newer people that have more recently been in school. But really, kind of it's almost like riding a bike. Once you kind of get into a groove, it just kind of keeps going. And I'm looking forward to when I am done next year in December. But yeah, like I said, just communicate early and often with everyone that is a stakeholder in your education, and growing support there. So I think if you do that, you'll definitely set, realistic expectations and set boundaries on the time you need to do different classwork and, meet everyone's expectations.
I think another advice I could give is start out slow if you're like I was also very nervous about going back. So I started my first semester, I took a 3 credit class and then a 1.5 credit class just to kind of get back into the swing of things, getting into a routine. And I think as much as you should, I completely agree, communicate with your manager often. I say what days I have class, but also communicate with your professors too. They're very flexible and they're very understanding. I travel a lot for work, and there's sometimes I'm in different time zones, whether that be 12 hours, 6 hours. And if I miss a class because I'm traveling, I've never had a professor that didn't understand. So I think give yourself a little bit of grace with that too, on both ends. And then remember why you're in school. Like you're hoping to accelerate your career and learn a new skill. So some weeks might be hard, you might be tired, but it's very fulfilling.
I would just add, for me, I think it has been a good experience as it relates to being more diligent around fierce prioritization. So, obviously, during business hours, I have full responsibility with my company that I work for, but you definitely look with a raised eyebrow at some of these meeting invites that come in and think, all right, is this can this be an email? Can we get to the same answer through a different format? So I think if you take that and apply it to the rest of your life, you have tons of opportunity to optimize your time. Look at your iPhone and look at how many hours you spend on that screen. You have more than enough time to do this program. You just got to get into a rhythm and get it done.
Yeah, I think for me, I've become a lot more proactive at identifying pockets of time to spend on classwork. And so whether that's, maybe I have an hour or two block on a weekend or in an evening or whatnot, if there's any kind of time that I can take advantage of to get work done, to do reading, study, things like that, then I do it. And I was definitely not like that at all in undergrad, but having to work full time, having to or wanting to, get the most out of the classes that I'm taking, I think has really forced me to do that. And I think that's a change for the better, honestly, moving forward as well.
We did have one final question come in. I'm happy to address it if people don't remember from 2 or 3 years ago, but any tips or suggestions that you would give regarding kind of the application process? Or the other question was around alumni engagement. Some of you are Lehigh alums already, but have you ever engaged with any Lehigh alums? Feel free if anybody wants to answer either of those questions.
During the application process, Kevin was a great resource. Actually, I think we met on Zoom at least twice. I had a lot of questions and very happy to answer them, talk through statement of purpose, identify the different concentrations as well as the general. So I think ask questions, be curious, like just as much as Lehigh is a great school, it's a great fit for me. And they also are asking you questions to learn about you as a prospective student as well.
Thanks, Veronica.
I would echo Veronica. I think, Kevin, we met at least once ahead of joining. So I think you guys being here is certainly a step in that direction. I also would add that you do have an opportunity, or it is a requirement, I believe, Kevin, to submit letters from others. So I use that as an opportunity to meet with people that I was requesting and just ask them, what can I do better? Kind of use it as more of like a feedback session. And it's a good excuse to ask people for that feedback. And then of course they're going to say the good things in the letter, but it's good to just, know that people are in your corner and know that I'm sure that they'll be very supportive of you getting higher education. So I really used it as a networking experience, and I found that to be useful more so professionally, but I'm sure, you can take some of those sentiments and apply them into your academic setting and responses as well.
Anybody else? I will add to it's 2 letters of recommendation. We typically are looking for current or former supervisors, or typically the people that we think are positioned the best. And I think to Alexis's point, it also signals a little bit to your boss, hey, I'm doing something big here, right? Like I'm going back to school. I'm looking to advance my career. So many times we see a lot of our students, while they get a lot of promotions and see salary increase after graduation, just kind of that signaling to your internal marketplace that like, hey, I'm taking a change here to better myself and better my education is a big first step. The thing I'll wrap up with quick, and thanks for all the great questions that came in. The nice thing is these group of people are technically on our website for a couple months here. So if you do have any specific follow-up questions, I'm always happy, as people said, to meet one-on-one with people. You can also message these students directly through our website if you have a specific question that you want to follow up with them on individually. I always say it's not a live chat, so it does take them, as working professionals, it'll take them a little time to get back to you. But again, trying to connect kind of our current students with our prospective students is a new initiative that we have this year. And what I'll say is to this group of students that are here, we couldn't ask for a better group of students to represent our program. And you can see, I think, from the high level of quality of this group here, it really is representative of the program. And rankings are one thing. They're important, I think, to a certain point, but when you actually look into some of the rankings for this program, specifically like the US News online MBA ranking, the quality of student, we are always ranked extremely, extremely high in. So thank you to everybody who was able to kind of participate in this tonight. Hopefully there'll be continued conversations in the future with our prospective students. And again, we're all here for our prospective students if you have questions along the way. So thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Hope everybody has a good rest of your semester for our active students, and have a good week, everybody. Take care.
Have a good night, everyone.
Night. Thanks,
Here.
guys.
Right.